research that is publicly available that you may not have come across that may make a difference in your life or the life of one of your loved ones. So we're not providing any medical advice here. In fact, what we would say is take this information if you're so interested, take it to a medical professional, a healthcare professional that you work with, and then let them decide if this is something that is right for you. The other thing is that we make absolutely no medical claims about any of our products. We're not insinuating that there's any link or claims. What we're simply going to do is talk about how to provide an environment in the body to promote the health and the vitality of the stem cells, how to manage inflammation. And then when you use products like X39 and Aeon, that's going to help form a foundation for general health and wellness. And we're going to get into some of the studies that we've done on X39 and Aeon. So, Jeff, hopefully that sets the right precedent, and we'll go from here.
Well, fantastic. Well, we can't wait to, as always, hear what you have prepared, and we'll then dive right into it. And I'll watch the questions, and we'll save some time at the end.
Yeah, there's also one other thing that I would say is the first thing that I'm going to be speaking about today in terms of natural remedies is that for those people that are interested in losing body fat, that would be especially of interest to them. So if you're somebody that wants to add something natural to your diet that's going to increase your lifespan, make you healthier, and also reduce excess body fat, then you may want to stick around for a minute. And you're also going to learn about that. So that's a bonus. So I think with that, let's go ahead and get started.
All right.
Okay. So first thing, since Aeon is a product that helps to manage stress, and we don't make any medical claims about the Aeon patch. We don't want to infer that we do. Basically, what we look at is how can Aeon reduce stress to help improve the quality of your life from the perspective of general wellness. What we're going to be speaking about now is chronic stress, which is something else entirely. And we're going to be looking at if you're under constant stress, maybe this is emotional stress, you're in a difficult relationship, you work a lot of hours, you have a tough lifestyle, maybe you're not getting enough sleep. This form of chronic stress can build up over time and can create a number of very significant health problems. So I think the first thing to do before we start looking at some natural products that can improve your health, let's first understand that the impact of stress is systemic. So sometimes we don't often associate that emotional stress can cause physical changes in the body. But in fact, everything is holistic and it is connected. So let's take a look at this so we can get an idea of just how bad stress really is. The first thing I think to start with is that it's obvious that when we experience some type of emotional or physical stress, this is going to cause the muscles in our body to tighten up. And this can lead, of course, to lower back pain, upper back pain, headaches, which may be acute or chronic, and different levels of pain. So one of the ways that stress is going to manifest is in muscle tension. So that's pretty obvious. Something, though, that you may not be familiar with is that stress can also affect the respiratory system. And there's actually some interesting statements here in this link that studies showed that acute stress can even trigger asthma attacks. So this, of course, is potentially life-threatening, and certainly something that people that are predisposed to respiratory problems should be aware of. Of course, during the pandemic, we heard a lot about inflammation through the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system and the risks associated with that. So if we had some natural ways of managing inflammation and managing stress of this type, that would be a great thing. So on the cardiovascular system, of course, we know that heart disease is the #1 killer, and the thing that we would most associate with stress relative to the cardiovascular system would be an increase in blood pressure. Now, if you go to a medical doctor who is trained in the pharmacological model and is not trained in nutrition, of course, they're going to typically recommend blood pressure medicine. But on the other hand, it's very well known now. And I would refer you to some of the works of Peter Attia, who's a medical doctor here in the United States, that exercise is way more effective than any pharmaceutical drug at managing blood pressure. In addition, new research on the amino acid taurine is showing that taurine is more effective than pharmaceutical drugs at lowering blood pressure. And taurine is a naturally occurring amino acid in the human body, meaning if you're using it properly, taking the correct dose for you, that taurine can be an effective way of helping to manage blood pressure. And not only that, but taurine helps your body recover from exercise and also has longevity benefits. As we age, the levels of taurine in our body reduce. So taurine will act also like an antioxidant. So these are natural methods. These are alternatives that we can look to as opposed to relying on blood pressure medication. It's also pretty self-evident that when we are under chronic stress, this is going to have an undesirable effect on our body's endocrine system. Mostly we would think about the adrenal glands, but we would also think about the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Hypothalamus, of course, we refer to as the brain of the brain. But what's interesting here is that when we're under stress, the body is going to release cortisol. Now, we tend to think of cortisol as a bad thing, but in an acute stress, cortisol isn't bad at all. It's actually going to facilitate the conversion of food over into energy, the conversion of carbohydrates, glucose, over into energy. So cortisol is a good thing in that respect. But if we're under constant stress, then elevated levels of cortisol outside of the normal range would now be undesirable. So we want to look at how can we manage stress so we can keep our adrenal glands, our hypothalamus and pituitary under control. When people have allergies, there's many different ways of looking at allergies. There's certainly a psychological component to allergies, but in the way that that manifests physically, the adrenal glands are always impacted. When I was 12, 13 years old, I suffered with terrible allergies. And this is a case where this is really a great thing that I was suffering with allergies, because it was one of the motivators that I had for learning everything about nutrition so I could find a natural way to deal with allergies. And in my case, I started taking about 2 grams per day of vitamin C and 2 grams of vitamin B5, pantothenic acid. And that combination helps the adrenal glands manage stress. And I'm grateful to say that I've been free of allergies since my teens. So that's been a long time now. The gastrointestinal system, this is something we often don't think of as being affected by stress, but take a look at this. This is fascinating. Stress is associated with changes in gut bacteria. So let's say you're someone that is struggling with your weight. One of the new things that medical science has been looking at are transplants of bacteria into the gut. And it's been shown that the microflora of the intestine in people that are thin are different than people that are overweight. So in other words, the stress that you have in your life could be contributing to your body being overweight, to having too much body fat. So a weight management tool, other than exercise, diet, drinking water, some natural solutions that we're going to be talking about today if you're overweight, those things are a foundation, but managing stress might actually assist the process in reducing body fat if you can get a favorable microflora. Okay, the nervous system, we won't spend too much more time on this because this is pretty self-evident that stress affects the nervous system. And for those of you that are still here, which I think we got more people on the call now I'm really going to drive this home. Men, if you are under stress, it's going to reduce your sex drive. Even worse, women, when you're under stress, and men know this, when you're under stress, the last thing that you want to think about is sex or sexual desire. So having a protocol, having strategies for managing stress can improve your sex life. So if you want a motivator for managing stress, if you don't care about your health and longevity, but you want a healthy sex life, you want to get your stress under control. So this is a great link. It's a really nice summary of all the different ways that stress affects the body. And you can go ahead and read this at your convenience. Now that we've done and gone and looked at this, let's shift gears for a minute. And I'd like to talk to you about how your body heals through the use of stem cells and the relationship between stress and inflammation and stem cells. So we're going to pull up a first article here. Now, inflammation, we've been speaking about this as being a bad thing, but actually we need inflammation. So let's use an example. You have an injury. Let's say that you bump your knee and you get a cut. And now what we want to do is have stem cells go to the site of that injury and begin to heal. So what happens biochemically? Well, first, there's going to be a release of oxidative stress. And there's also more copper that goes to the injury site. And the purpose of this is to suppress bacterial infection. So while we think of oxidative stress as being a bad thing, it serves an incredibly important role in the body at suppressing bacterial infection, suppressing the formation of cancer cells, killing off bacteria, viruses. So oxidative stress under control serves an incredibly important role in the human body. Similar with inflammatory stress. So when the body produces inflammatory cytokines, this will act as a signal for stem cells. So in other words, when we think of, in a simple way, how does the human body really work? Well, every cell has to make or use energy, and every cell has to communicate with other cells and being able to communicate with its environment. So if we want a really simple model of how the human body works, we break it down into energy and communication. It's obviously way more complicated than that, but let's think about it in those terms for the moment. So when we think about, there are stem cells, mesenchymal or MSC stem cells that are in the bone marrow, or they're stored in fat. How do they get to where they're needed? Well, when there is a release of inflammatory cytokines at an injury site, that acts as a signal to say, hey, we need stem cells in this part of the body. So if you look at this research, this is more or less what they're talking about in very simple terms. The article obviously gets into extraordinary detail, but the point here is that it's not so black and white between saying that inflammation is bad for the body. We need some inflammation. It's part of the healing process. And in fact, what's interesting is that stem cells, we think of stem cells as dividing and turning into healthy cells, but there's a variety of stem cells in the body. When we were doing our work at the National University of Ireland in Galway, the type of stem cells that we were dealing with are the MSCs. And we were looking to see, can we improve the activity of these MSCs using electromagnetic energy? And the answer to that was yes. So interestingly enough, the stem cells in the body are capable, in this case, of helping the body to manage inflammation, although we don't normally think of it that way. Now, on the downside, what we would typically think of is that when someone has had an injury for a long period of time, so let's say that you're someone that suffers with a shoulder injury and it's not healing, and you've tried everything and it doesn't seem to heal. What's going on there? Well, you're in a state where you have chronic inflammation, and when the stem cells get to the injury site, they're killed off by the inflammation. So in your case, you'd want to think about a two-step process. The first step is use natural materials, use technology to reduce the inflammation. In this article, they're talking about an anti-inflammatory drug in this study, but we know obviously that there are natural materials that we'll talk about momentarily that are capable of managing inflammation without the side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. The first thing that you do is you get your inflammation under control. The second thing is to mobilize those stem cells and use things to improve the health and the vitality of those stem cells. And now you can heal, whereas otherwise you might not. So this whole subject of inflammation is incredibly important when we talk about managing pain and managing inflammation and managing healing. All right, so now we're going to talk about some solutions, and you're going to find, I think, some very pleasant surprises as we go through this. Okay, the first thing that we're going to talk about now is olive oil. So I want to tell you about an experience that I had, and we were doing a study on our energy enhancer patches in Italy. And we were working with a very well-known medical doctor there who will, as you'll see, is going to be left unknown because of the context of this story. So we were doing this study, and I flew into Rome to meet with this doctor, and we had lunch together, and we were having pasta, as you might normally do in Italy, and we got to the subject of talking about olive oil. And it had turned out that he had done a number of clinical studies on olive oil that were extremely interesting. The first thing was he had found in his research that nearly all of the benefits of the Mediterranean diet could be attributed to olive oil. The second thing is that he had developed a process, and this is commercially available today. I found one company that will do this, where he took the pits of olives, and there's a compound that is highly anti-cancer. And he blended this with olive oil. The olive oil acts as a carrier. As we know, olive oil is principally monounsaturated fats, and these fats help to carry this active ingredient in the pits of the olives into the body. He did a study, and he had about an 85% success rate at treating cancer with this combination. The olive oil apparently would help to manage the inflammation that the cancers were creating, and this compound in olive pits was directly killing the cancer cells. So that's for your information. Olive oil is extremely powerful. Now, another thing about olive oil is it turns out you can use it as a method for losing weight. It'll activate the same receptors as the drug Ozempic, and so it can help to suppress appetite. But the really important thing is you're not going to be able to use a olive oil that you would find in your supermarket. This has to be a pure extra virgin olive oil that's high in polyphenols, rich in oleuropein, which are some of the actives. So you want to make sure that your olive oil is pure, and there's a few places online where you can get that. We're not promoting any one specific brand. But the important thing here is to point out that olive oil is a very powerful anti-inflammatory and has massive longevity benefits. As a matter of fact, it's said to be more effective than resveratrol at activating two of the sirtuin genes in the body for promoting longevity. So something as simple as olive oil. Okay, another thing I want to mention here, and why you should be concerned about the quality of your olive oil is here's a compound called oleocanthal. Another one that I just mentioned was oleuropein. Let's say that you're a woman and you're concerned about breast cancer, or let's say that you have breast cancer. If you're here in the United States, they'll give you a drug called Arimidex, and when women have breast cancer, there's two forms of estrogen during the metabolism of estrogen. And essentially what happens during these biochemical paths, you can develop a metabolite that is either inflammatory or not. And so this is what happens with women that develop breast cancer, is through the metabolism of estrogen, they develop inflammation, and then this leads to breast cancer. So this drug Arimidex is administered to help block this conversion. But actually, oleuropein, which is a naturally occurring compound in pure virgin olive oil, or you can get oleuropein as a supplement, has been shown in studies to actually be more effective than Arimidex for this purpose. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, so you should take this information to your medical doctor in developing a overall holistic plan that's right for yourself. But I don't think most doctors are going to object to someone using olive oil as a way to improve their health. Okay. And then one last one over here. Now, actually, we're going to go skip to something else now. Now we're going to talk about curcumin. And since we just talked about the implications of inflammation relative to breast cancer for women, let's talk about men for a moment. And one of the problems that men deal with during their life can be prostate cancer. So if we want to say something good about prostate cancer, it would be that usually men will die of a different disease before they ever die of prostate cancer. So that might be the positive side. Of course, men that deal with benign prostate hyperplasia, inflammation of the prostate, that can be very uncomfortable, and some men choose to have their prostate removed. Well, what if there was a natural way of dealing with all of this? So a medical doctor I know here in Florida, we were having a discussion about this. We became quite friendly since as a medical doctor, he happened to study nutrition and was using different natural nutritional approaches with his patients. We used to get into great conversations about this. And we talked about this subject of prostate cancer, and what he was doing for his patients was using a blend of curcumin and DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. And he would administer this through IV once per week. And I asked him how effective was this in treating prostate cancer, and he said 100%. Out of his many, many years of using this with men, he was able to bring down their PSA levels naturally and treat the prostate cancer naturally. He never had to send them off for surgery or for chemotherapy. So this is the power of these two natural compounds. I will caution you, though, that DMSO is something that you would want to use with a professional that has experience with it, since it's a blood thinner, and taking too much DMSO will thin the blood to where it's dangerous. So used properly, extremely safe, used irresponsibly and without experience, potentially dangerous. So keep that in mind. Curcumin, on the other hand, comes from turmeric root, and curcumin is the active compound. And there's a number of different ways of synthesizing the active curcumin. This is one form that we've looked at over the years called BCM 95. We don't manufacture this, we don't sell it. I'm just using this as literature so you can be aware that if you want to use curcumin for managing inflammation in the body, be aware that some forms of curcumin are better than others. And you can see here, this article is incredible because it talks about curcumin being an antioxidant, an anti-inflammatory, having anti-cancer properties, and is currently under different phases of clinical trials for uses in soft tissue cancers. So this would be something that will help to manage inflammation in the body, is great for your overall health, may even provide a prophylactic effect. Okay, this is one of my favorites, vitamin D. So you may remember during the pandemic in the state of California that the beaches were shut down. And they didn't want, for some reason, people going to the beach and getting vitamin D and exposure to sun during the pandemic. Really weird. And of course, what we found out was that people that were at greatest risk for dying from COVID-19 were those that were suffering with a deficiency of vitamin D. I remember back then when I was researching this, and in fact, about 85% of the people, and this is years ago now, so that data may be old, but at the time, I remember reading a study which was showing that 85% of the people that were dying from COVID-19 had a vitamin D deficiency. And now we know that what happens is that the vitamin D surrounds the virus and makes it more difficult for the virus to replicate. We also know that COVID-19 will produce a very powerful inflammatory response in the body, and vitamin D is a very effective anti-inflammatory. Okay, another thing about vitamin D, again, for those of you that are concerned about cancer, you might be suffering with it. There have been studies that I've read over the years where just vitamin D in really high doses, 50,000 IU doses. So a normal dose might be 5,000 IUs. So 50,000 IUs at a time over a period of a few weeks has been used by itself as a very powerful anti-cancer remedy. So we're going to take a look at this. But bear in mind that you don't want to take high doses of vitamin D daily. It can cause problems with your kidneys. You want to do this in conjunction with your medical doctor. And so you want to make sure that doing something like this is okay for you. So 5,000 IUs per day is what most healthcare professionals would say is good for most people. But for treating cancer and having this massive anti-inflammatory effect, doses of 50,000 IUs have been used. So here's a conclusion here. Our study confirmed the beneficial effects of vitamin D supplementation in overweight and obese pediatric populations. So this is interesting. Again, we're talking about how to manage earlier, how to manage weight, and we're looking at olive oil as an anti-inflammatory and also as a means of suppressing appetite. And here, by having something as cheap and inexpensive as olive oil and vitamin D, now we have a basis for helping to support healthy body composition. So who would have thought that inflammation is strongly linked to obesity? Okay, link between vitamin D and inflammation. So this is not a study directly, but it's an article that refers to studies. And I'll just skip through this because we've already covered it. But basically, this was on the use of vitamin D as a potential therapeutic for treatment of COVID-19. Okay, now this study was really interesting. This was done in, I suppose, Saudi Arabia, because it's was with healthy male Saudis. But what's interesting about this is that this was a single dose of 80,000 IUs of vitamin D. So here it is, 50 healthy Saudi males were recruited, and they were given an oral supplement. So it doesn't even have to be administered by injection. 80,000 IUs of vitamin D, by the way, is extremely tiny. Talking about a very tiny pill. And what was interesting here is that, here it is right here, the vitamin D status in a significant decrease in the levels of inflammatory cytokines. Remember, the inflammatory cytokines are what are killing off the stem cells if they're too high. So now you want to deal with that inflammation in your shoulder where you can't heal. You take a high dose of vitamin D, it reduces the inflammatory cytokines that are killing off the stem cells. And this dose, this high dose, lasted for even 1 month after supplementation. So here we go, the conclusion of the study. A single dose of vitamin D3, which is pennies, is safe for reducing inflammation markers and may prevent critical health problems. Extremely safe and inexpensive. Talk to your doctor about that. Okay, now we're going to talk about another compound, and I promise you I'm getting to the patches. I just wanted to provide this foundation here. Green tea, the humble green tea. My wife and I, we love green tea, and when I am in Denmark with her, we go to a tea shop down in Copenhagen, and we enjoy some green tea. Well, we see that there are a number of studies that are showing some extraordinary things with green tea, some of which you may not have heard of. So, for example, one of the things that's known is that EGCG can actually kill fat cells in the body. So if you're looking for now a way for summer to reduce your body fat and get healthy, you've got olive oil for reducing and managing inflammation, suppressing the appetite. You've got vitamin D to manage the inflammation associated with obesity. And now you have EGCG for killing those fat cells. Another interesting thing, let's say, again, you're someone that's suffering with cancer. You want to talk to your doctor about a natural strategy for managing the cancer or dealing with it. Dr. Matthias Rath here in the United States found that the combination of vitamin C, the amino acid lysine, the amino acid proline, and EGCG could completely block, 100% block the migration of cancer cells from one part of the body to the other. It didn't kill the cancer cells, but it prevented the cancer from spreading. So this is really remarkable. Not chemotherapy, totally safe, healthy for the body, helps to manage inflammation and oxidative stress. So we should be aware that these things exist. Here's another thing that I found really interesting. Of course, in the field of stem cells, one of the big challenges is how do we deal with spinal cord injuries? So we know that when there's damage to the spinal cord, I think of poor Christopher Reeve, who played Superman so amazingly back in the 1970s. Of course, he had that accident where he fell off a horse. He had a traumatic spinal cord injury, and that was the end of his functional life. And there is scarring that develops at the injury site around the spinal cord that prevents the stem cells from healing that injury. So how do we deal with this? Well, this is really interesting. This is an animal study, but here we see on the basis of these findings, we propose that EGCG may be effective in protecting the spinal cord from secondary damage by modulating the inflammatory reactions. So that's exciting research. Okay, and then one last one on EGCG. So let's say you're taking your green tea or you're getting an EGCG supplement because you want to kill the fat cells, you want to help to manage your inflammation. Another benefit that you're going to get from this is that it's going to help prevent bacterial infections. So you get a cut, you're out, having a good time during the summer, you get cut on something and you're taking your green tea, and now maybe this helps to prevent you from getting bacterial infection that will cause a serious problem. Okay, so that's a foundation for our discussion. Now, we're going to go over and talk about the patches, and then in a few minutes, we'll go ahead and take some questions. So X39, as you'll see in our back office, we have a number of studies, and there's new studies going on right now with X39. But one of the things that we've seen, in addition to the ability of this product to improve health and wellness, is that when we do blood tests, we see that it helps to support healthy levels of the body's copper peptide, known as GHKCU. So copper peptide is a naturally occurring peptide in the body that will decline with age. And it's very important for our overall health. So this was a pilot study that we did on 10 people early on, and we wanted to know, does X39 elevate copper peptide, as was the hypothesis? And in this pilot study, we found that we got statistical significance. We then, practicing good science, went ahead and did a follow-up study. And in this follow-up study, we worked with 60 people. And this was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, one of many that we did. And of course, what we showed is that using X39 does, in fact, increase levels of copper peptide in the body. And what's fantastic about this is that copper peptide is naturally occurring, and we're elevating levels with light. It's completely safe because our patches don't put anything into the body. Copper peptide is naturally occurring, so it's not going to be harmful in any way. And copper peptide acts like an antioxidant in the body. So we get the benefits of this very powerful antioxidant in addition to everything else that it does. I'll also quickly mention about the Aeon patch. All these studies are in our back office and many, many, many more. But here was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study that we did on the Aeon patch. And this was done with Dr. Homer Nazaran at the University of Texas in El Paso. Dr. Nazaran is a biomedical engineer. He retired, which was a real bummer for us because we loved working with Dr. Nazaran. And if he happens to be listening, Dr. Nazaran, we love your work and we thank you so much for your years of service to LifeWave. So one of the things that Dr. Nazaran was able to find is that when we tested this, the hypothesis was that wearing the Aeon patch would reduce stress in as little as 20 minutes. And this study showed that it was true. Another study that we did is when we're looking at stress, we want to look at, let's say we do urine testing or blood testing and find out, are there any type of biochemical changes that occur within the body? We did a study with Dr. Melinda Connor, and a shout out to Dr. Melinda Connor, who's amazing, doing so much great work. Her and her daughter, Dr. Caitlin Connor, doing amazing work for LifeWave. We're so grateful to work with them. This was a pilot study of 20 people that was early on in the days when we were first looking at Aeon. And the results were that, yes, when you wear the Aeon patch, there are measurable changes that occur in the urine. And these have a beneficial effect on helping the body to manage stress. So, Jeff, this is all to say that we should be thinking about having a strategy in our daily life for managing stress. And if we do a little bit each day, include some olive oil, take some supplements, have our green tea. If we do these kind of things, use the patches, we can help to manage stress, have a healthy life. And for those people that have already found that they have a serious health problem, if they're new to LifeWave and they're coming in and saying, hey, I've neglected my health for years and I need something to help get my life back in check. The great news is that there are natural remedies that you can go to your doctor with, and the sky's really the limit. Whether or not someone's dealing with heart disease, diabetes, cancer, there's natural remedies for all these things.
Very amazing stuff. This is it took lots of notes again, and we certainly have several questions, David. So if you're okay, we'll just jump right into those.
Absolutely.
So one of the first ones was, and it's on Aeon. It says, "What year was Aeon launched?" And can you share a little bit about the story behind it?
Okay, that's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. So, yeah, the development of Eon began back in 2009, 2010, and then that's when we launched it. And I was at a party in Palm Springs, California. I was at Suzanne Summers' house, and I was in one of Suzanne's books, Breakthrough, and she was having a party there for all of the doctors and scientists in that book. And one of the doctors that was there was Dr. Stan Brzezinski. And Dr. Brzezinski, amazing guy, as are his wife and son, who are all three are medical doctors. And Dr. Brzezinski should get a Nobel Prize for his discovery. And unfortunately, he's been attacked. But I went to go see him about some longevity research that he was doing. And what he found was that if you take a bee, the queen bee lives 50 to 60 times longer than a worker bee. And he found that if you took this peptide that is naturally occurring in the human body, but decreases with age, and you inject it into the worker bee, one injection would increase the lifespan of the worker bee by 5 to 6 times above normal. So, and say, could you imagine doing that in human beings where you increase your lifespan to 500 or 600 years? I would sign me up for that, because you don't age, in the process.
Yeah.
So, the method that Dr. Brzezinski was working on is that this peptide had a very short half-life, and you would need to administer it for 20 hours per day to get a therapeutic effect. So this obviously was out of the question for pretty much everybody. So I thought, I'm going to try to develop a patch that will elevate this peptide, and let's see if we can get some longevity benefits to it. So that's how Aeon developed. And what we found was that the Aeon patch would help to manage stress in the body. So it began to make sense that if this peptide was responsible for the longevity in bees, that managing stress would make sense. when we've done our longevity studies, one of the species that we've looked at are clams. We've looked at mollusks, and there have been mollusks that have been found that are over 500 years old. And in those species, they have complete control over the inflammatory stress, meaning they're 500 years old, but they look like they're 20 years old, if we want to put it in human terms. So one of the keys to longevity is managing oxidative and inflammatory stress. And that's why this is so important. And in people human beings that live to be over 100, one of the things that you find in their diet is olive oil. Uh, so that gives you an idea how powerful this is.
It's incredible. Well, sticking on the theme of Eon here, we've got someone who's asking, is it better to wear it during the day or the night? And can you kind of explain why you might suggest what you suggest?
Yeah. So, our recommendations have changed over the years. So I would say it all depends on the individual. We generally would recommend X39 during the day, and Eon can be used either during the day or in the evening, totally up to the individual. I've experimented with both over the years for my personal use, and I tend to really like using Eon in the evening. I find that it calms my nervous system, gives me a really good night quality of sleep. And of course, I've experimented with the use of that with Silent Nights and Alavita. So I would say it's up to the individual to experiment with it. If someone was dealing with an acute or chronic pain, I'd recommend them trying X39 on the back of the neck and then Eon at the point of pain. And they can see what kind of results they get with that.
Very good. Someone's asking that, in your course of studying Eon, were there any other benefits that came out of those studies than stress?
Well, I'd have to say the answer is yes, and I'd probably also have to say there's probably some things I can't say. I know that our legal counsel, Doug Whitehead, he's probably already stressing from everything I've talked about today, so I don't want to give him any more pressure. But I think it'd be suffice it to say that when we do our studies, they're designed to support our wellness claims. So when we do studies on X39, we're never trying to see if it's going to treat or cure a disease. We're a general wellness company, and we want to see, does this support energy, recovery from exercise? Does it help to manage pain, improve sleep? Those are the goals that we're looking for. So the type of things that we've found in the studies with Eon, we have done blood studies. We have done studies with Dr. Tom Budzinski on managing the stress in the nervous system. So I think I would just say that the studies we've done definitely supports the claims that Eon manages stress.
Very good. Someone's asking if you could speak a little to why it's recommended to drink a lot of water and stay hydrated while you're using the patches.
So this first started when we were looking at acupuncture. And so the acupuncture points are natural points in the human body. It's how we were created to have these energy systems in the body. So the nervous system is an energy system. The acupuncture points, they're an energy system. And one of the things that we see in the cells is that water is essential for the process of making energy, and water is essential for the process of detoxification. So as we age, and the body becomes more dehydrated because of a loss of collagen. So if we could picture a cell being nice and big and healthy, and as we age, the amount of collagen production begins to decrease. Collagen is like a sponge that holds water. So the cell begins to shrink, the levels of hydration decrease, and now it becomes more difficult for our bodies to make energy and detoxify. So a very critical anti-aging strategy is to get the cells hydrated.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, you can't do that with just water, not normal water anyway. Maybe if somebody were to invent a special type of water, then we could hydrate the cell better. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see if anybody invents anything like that. Also, having a strategy to increase collagen production in the body would be important to that. But this is to say that the reason why we recommend getting enough water is so that you have what you need to make energy and detoxify the cells. In studies that we saw with acupuncture, when people were not responding to the acupuncture therapy, one of the reasons was because they were dehydrated.
All right. This individual says, had surgery on my fractured wrist about 5 weeks ago. What patches would you suggest that I put on and where? I feel a bit overwhelmed at times, and I've been using some of the patches for just a month now.
Say again, it was
If they
to
had
put them on the
surgery on their
wrist.
fractured wrist, and they're just
Okay.
wondering if you had any recommendations on where they might place patches for the best results.
Yeah, I think I'd say is okay. First, again, I just repeat that I'm not a medical doctor. We're not giving medical advice. This would be for helping to manage the pain. Um, if someone is using, let's say, X39 on the back of the neck for general wellness, they have a few options. One is they could try putting Aeon directly at the point of pain on the wrist. Another thing they could do is use Ice Wave. And with the Ice Wave patch, they would put the tan patch at the point of pain and then follow the instructions where they move the white patch around the injury until they get the best pain relief. So in our studies, you would use what we call the clock method, apply the white patch, leave it in a location for 15 seconds, move your hand and wrist around. If you don't get the pain, relief of pain or the drop in pain that you're looking for, move the white patch again and move it around the outside the tan patch until you get the best pain relief. That method works incredibly well.
Very good. All right. Someone is asking, you talked a lot about cortisol levels. Is there a way that someone can measure cortisol levels in the body? And if so, how? So they could see if there's an effect before and after.
Yeah, absolutely. One method of measuring cortisol is a saliva test. So they could go to their doctor. They could just go online here in the United States. They could go to a place called LabCorp, and they could do a salivary test for cortisol. That would be one that we've used. I believe there's also one where you can test for cortisol with urine. So I guess it would depend on what their doctor would recommend. But it's you don't need to do a blood test.
Very good. I'll
Yeah.
kind of try to squeeze in maybe one more question here. You talked a lot about olive oil, and I know you said you didn't want to promote any brands, but everybody's asking, well, where can we go to find the right stuff and make sure that it is the real, olive oil, and that it would be effective?
I would say, I've gone to a few different companies. Um, I would say go online and see if you can buy direct from a company where they grow the olives and they make the olive oil. And I know I've purchased real extra virgin olive oil from Spain before. That was amazing. Real olive oil tastes very different than the type of olive oil that you get in the supermarket. I'm sorry to say that um, here in the US, much of the olive oil is counterfeit. That actually, the FDA told me that there's counterfeit olive oil in honey that gets into the United States from China. So, but real extra virgin olive oil is going to have this incredibly smooth, buttery texture. It will also have a little bit, it'll almost taste like there's pepper in it. It's very distinctive. So, real extra virgin olive oil will be very different than the olive oil in a store. And that's important. So, yeah, I would try to go direct to a company that it will be a little expensive, but it's certainly well worth it.
Very good. Well, as always, David, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and for sharing the studies and all the information. It was very edifying. Is there anything that you'd like to say as we close out the webinar today?
Well, I think I would just like to again thank all of our brand partners around the world for helping LifeWave to be where we are. Um, it's amazing how many lives that we're touching all over the globe because of our brand partners. And we have some amazing events that are coming up this year. And of course, at our big event in October, we're going to be showing off some new things and taking LifeWave ahead in an entirely new generation, which is going to open the door for us to help people improve their health or longevity and provide hope to those in need. So I feel very blessed and fortunate that we have our brand partners to help carry the message of LifeWave around the globe. So I'd want to just say God bless them and their families for everything that they do for us.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks again, David. And we will see you next month on our next Product Connect webinar. Bye-bye.